Hey guys, I am back to close out the month of May Action. May Action month is finally coming to an end, or not so finally coming to an end. I've had a blast talking about the movies that I've talked about this month, and I was thinking about exactly what I wanted to close the month out with, because originally I had no movie planned for this week. The four movies that I did this month, those were planned, but I didn't really know what movie I wanted to close out the month with, and it wasn't until after I went to see The Final Reckoning, Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning, I said, you know what, let me do a Tom Cruise movie, because honestly I don't think I've done a Tom Cruise movie on the podcast. And everything. So that's another reason why I decided to do this. And I thought it would be interesting to go back to 2012 and do Jack Reacher. Jack Reacher, which is the first director actor collaboration. Not the first collaboration, because Christopher McQuarrie, who directs Jack Reacher, he actually wrote the script for Valkyrie, which came out in 2008. But this is the first time that he directed Tom Cruise, and he's been Tom Cruise director pretty much ever since. In the majority of the movies, particularly the later half of the Mission Impossible series and everything, which is kind of interesting in the fact that, looking at Christopher McQuarrie's filmography, now he wrote the screenplay for Your Usual Suspects. He directed The Way of the Gun in 2000, which I did review a long time ago on the podcast. And he writes the screenplay for Valkyrie in 2008, but there's 11 years pretty much that goes by between him directing his first movie, The Way of the Gun, and then 2012 when he directs Jack Reacher. And I've always kind of wondered, why exactly was that? I mean, you come out of the gate as this writer who writes this great script and everything in The Usual Suspects, and then you direct this, I don't want to say low budget, but it's this action movie that stars Ryan Phillippe, Benicio del Toro, Taye Diggs. I call him Alt-World Cheech Marin, who's at the at the brothel at the end of the movie. James Caan is in it also. And I think it's a dope movie. I enjoyed talking about the movie when I reviewed it and everything. But it's just kind of weird that his next movie is 12 years later that he directs, and then he goes on and has, like, he's been constantly directing films since, and a large part of that has been Tom Cruise productions. And I just kind of think that's interesting how that went. Like, what was he doing for the most part of those 11 years? Because, like I say, he only writes the screenplay for Valkyrie, which came out in 2008. Like, what else was he really doing around that time and everything? But to talk about the cast for a second. Now, of course, we have Tom Cruise as the title character, Jack Reacher. I know there was a lot of talk when he was cast in this role. In particular, the fact that Tom Cruise he doesn't fit the physical description of what Jack Reacher is in the Lee Child novels about the character Jack Reacher and everything. Clearly, he's not 6'5", like 260 or whatever. And this is years before Alan Richardson comes along and plays the character on the Amazon Prime series Reacher and everything, which is a great show, by the way. But this is long before him. But there was a lot of talk about, maybe they should get Dwayne Johnson to play Jack Reacher. Tom Cruise is too short and all this type of stuff. And it's like, I mean, if you want it to be completely book accurate, yeah, why not get Dwayne Johnson to play the character, right? Why not? But I feel like Tom, he actually does capture the essence of what the character is in his own way. If you watch the TV series Reacher and then you watch the movies with Tom Cruise, yes, clearly the physical attributes of both actors are completely different, but I feel like they both capture that kind of dry, way that they are with people and very quick-witted and everything. They both nail that. So, like I say, no, Tom Cruise, he does not fit the physical characteristics of the character, but I feel like he does get everything else down as far as what the character of Jack Reacher is. We have Rosamund Pike in this as well. Richard Jenkins. Werner Herzog is in this as well, which is kind of weird to see him playing the villain of this movie. David Oyelowo is in this as well. Jai Courtney, and probably, in my opinion, probably his best performance. I mean, I think right now he's kind of getting some praise for this horror movie that he's in, where he plays this madman that kidnap people and feed them to freaking sharks. I think he's getting some buzz about that and everything. But of the movies that I've seen with Jai Courtney, I think this is like his best acting performance. And then also you have Tommy himself from the Power universe. A young Joseph Sequoia is in this as well, and I think it has a good cast. And like I said, it was directed by Christopher McQuarrie and everything. I enjoy the cast of this movie. Is a lot of actors that you probably wouldn't think that would mesh with each other, but they kind of do, and everything. And what's wild about this is that Tom Cruise is 50 years old when he makes this movie. I mean, he's 62 now, about to be 63, but he turns 50. He's 50 years old when he does Jack Reacher, and a lot of the stuff that he does in this movie is like, yeah, I mean, we kind of knew at the time, like, yeah, Tom was not slowing down as far as the physical stuff that he does, and here he is at 62 still doing a lot of insane stuff. And for anyone who's seen Dead Reckoning and the Final Reckoning, the Mission Impossible movies, he kind of showed like, yeah, he still got a lot left in the tank when it comes to doing crazy stuff or whatever. And then of course he's still planning on, he wants to go into space to film a movie, and we'll see how that goes, and everything. But this was a little bit different when it came to his performances, because up to 2012 he was still doing characters for the most part. Ethan Hunt was still a character. I mean, granted, he kind of becomes a little bit stoic as the franchise moves on, especially when, I would say, from Ghost Protocol on, he does kind of start to become a little stoic or whatever. But Tom Cruise was, he was doing characters, and everything. Of course, him showing up as Les Grossman in freaking Tropic Thunder, which still, to the amazement of a lot of people, surprised people and everything like that. But Jack Reacher, how he is and how he carries himself was a little bit different from what I think people got used to seeing of Tom Cruise and everything, in a good way, because I think people kind of forget that Tom Cruise is actually, he really is a very good actor. He kind of, I want to say, put himself in a box as far as being an action star and everything. And granted, he comes out of it every so often, and everything. But for the most part, he put himself in that action star box. But if this is the final Mission Impossible that he stars in, I'm looking forward to seeing what he does after. And are these going to be actual, I want to say, human characters, opposed to, these kind of one note type of characters? Even though, like I say, when you look at Ethan in the first couple of Mission Impossible. Then you look at him in the later ones. He does kind of, like I say, he does kind of become a little stoic. But I don't want to focus too much on talking about Mission Impossible. We're here to talk about Jack Reacher. So, who is Jack Reacher? I mean, he's this ex-military police, officer and everything. He's a drifter because he has no residence. He roams the earth. He's kind of like Kane in the Kung Fu, where he just kind of walks the earth and then he just happens upon, helping people who need help. He's like a one-man A-team in a sense and everything. And he does have he has a moral code and everything, and he is a do-gooder for the most part. And it's interesting how this movie, in a way, it actually kind of raises the bar a little bit when it comes to action movies. Because this movie is 2 years before John Wick, which elevates, how with the precision and everything when it comes to action. But this movie is one of those movies that also kind of help raises the bar of what we know of how about being tactical and everything when it comes to that, when it comes to how we look at action movies now in movies, and everything. I would say the way this movie starts off with Jai Courtney's character pulling into this parking garage, and he pulls out a sniper rifle, and how he's very methodical before he starts letting off these shots. And it is a eye opener. It is an attention getter. The fact he just brutally, guns down these 5 people, and the last victims happens to be this woman and her young child as she's running away. And it's like, what the hell is going on here? But it definitely gets your attention. And then the whole thing about the character James Barr, who Joseph Sequoia plays and everything. He's the one that is the one supposed to have done this, but us as the audience know, like, that's not him. Like, that's not the dude that we saw in the parking garage. We as the audience know this, but of course, the characters in the movie don't know this. And the fact of he's there, he don't actually remember doing this, but he is taking blame for it. He's actually taking, he's like, well, I need y'all to get me Jack Reacher. It's like, who the hell is Jack Reacher? And that's kind of how it, how Jack Reacher is kind of introduced and everything, to find out that, he gets brought in to be like the private investigator for the defendant, in a sense, and everything, where, well, James wanted him to come in and investigate, and then while he's in prison, he actually ends up getting beat up real bad and put into a coma, so he can't really talk and everything, so he's pretty much out of the paint. So basically he's like, Jack got to try to figure everything out, and put the pieces together on his own for the most part. One thing too about this movie, when you watching Tom Cruise in a movie, you're gonna get Tom Cruise. He's gonna dedicate himself to his craft. That's one thing about the man. I mean, people can say what they want to say about him and everything, but one thing that you can't really hate on is the fact that he's very passionate, and he's very, very in tune and in line with what he wants to do when it comes to the action in his movies. He wants it to be real. He wants, hey, if this is being done, you're going to know that I am doing this, and you're going to see my face. And in this movie, I mean, he doesn't do anything on the level what he would go on to do in the Mission Impossible films, but clearly he's driving, that muscle car. Clearly he's, doing all the fight scenes. And I mean, the fight scene with him and Jai Courtney towards the end of the movie is really dope and everything, especially with the fact they're fighting in the rain and it's in the mud and they kind of slipping and sliding all over the place. And then of course, we do get some shootouts and stuff like that and everything. So like I said, it's nothing too crazy, but it's still the fact that here he is, how he's committed to what he does. And I think that kind of helps add even more to what the movie in itself is and everything. And I mean, I feel like this is one of his better movies. Now, I wouldn't necessarily put it in my top 10 of Cruise films, but it's definitely, if we're just talking about him as an action star, it's definitely up there. If we're just going off of the action movies that he's done throughout his career, I would probably put it in my top 10 of his action films, but not necessarily, it wouldn't make the top 10 of his overall filmography for me. But it's definitely up there in regards to his action films and everything. So let's talk about some of the other characters in this movie. I mentioned, pretty much the main cast, but we have Rosamund Pike here as Helen, and she's James Bard, defense lawyer, but also she's Richard Jenkins' character's daughter, and she's just kind of trying to figure out what the hell is going on, and also trying to figure out the whole thing, like who exactly is freaking Jack Reacher and all this. And I know there's kind of been this running thing that Tom Cruise doesn't really have great chemistry with a lot of his leading ladies or whatever, but I do think that him and Rosamund Pike, they do have some chemistry. Granted, they don't spend a lot of screen time together, but the screen time that they do get together, you can kind of tell, like, if this was a different movie, yeah, I think there is, chemistry between them and everything. And I like later in the film when Robert Duvall shows up, who hasn't, he was in a Tom Cruise movie once upon a time, a little movie called Days of Thunder, where he plays his crew chief and everything. So this was the first time that they have worked together since Days of Thunder, and how he comes along for the journey as well. And I like to see where it's like after everything is over, and Jack Reacher and Helen are talking, and he's like, "Go on, come on now, get a number, let's go," type of thing. And we never know if he actually does get her number or not. But that's the thing about Jack Reacher, he kind of moves around, and I'm pretty sure he's met a couple of Helens and everything like that throughout his travels around the country and everything. But I think she does a great job in this movie. I mean, one thing about Rosamund Pike, she is a very good actress. She's an intense actress, and I do feel like she should be in a lot more stuff and everything. And is kind of crazy that she does do Gone Girl relatively close around this time and everything. And I wonder why they didn't really capitalize off of her in Gone Girl and this as well. Like, the projects that she could have probably been a part of. But at the same time, she does the things that she really enjoyed doing. I mean, she is a dope actress. I enjoy her work and everything overall. But I probably would like to have seen her in more stuff like, kind of similar-ish to Gone Girl, or even if she continued like in the action realm, not necessarily Doom, which she was in with The Rock, ironically, but more action stuff, probably like Jack Reacher and things in that nature or whatever. When things really get kind of cooking, I should say, we start to question, okay, is one of those characters, working with the bad guys? And they do this very good job of misdirection regarding who is the one that turns out to be working with the villains, because they make you think it's one of them, but it's actually the other one, and everything. And I won't necessarily spoil it so much if you've never seen Jack Reacher and everything, which I failed to mention that it is actually streaming on Paramount Plus and MGM Plus. If you have any of those streaming services, you can definitely check out the movie like that if you don't own it, and everything. But I do enjoy what those characters are given to do in this movie, for the most part and everything. So Werner Herzog, he, as the villain. Okay, so if anyone doesn't know anything about Warner, he is a filmmaker himself, and the fact that they got him to show up in this movie and play the villain, the Zinc and everything, which is a very bizarre kind of off character, but he has like this chilling type of vibe to him and everything. And what's interesting about it, he doesn't get physical or anything, but it's just that tone of voice that he has and the way he speaks is very unnerving. Like, and it's, I mean, because anybody could be a character that, that imposes like brute, force or whatever, and is very imposing. He's not very imposing, but it's the way he carries himself and the way he plans everything and what and how he gets, his henchmen basically to do the things they do for him, and everything, which is like I say, he's a different type of villain in this movie, which you don't really see a lot of movies that have villains like him. And I mean, you can kind of understand why, but at the same time, it is good to have villains in movies like this because he's a very unassuming, but he carries himself in a very kind of intense, menacing way, and everything. And then, of course, like I said, I mentioned earlier about Jai Courtney, who, I mean, Hollywood was trying to make him a thing, and everything. And unfortunately, they kind of failed with that because I kind of do believe that Hollywood has been looking for the next Russell Crowe for a long time, and they've tried with quite a few actors, but everybody can't be Russell Crowe. And Jai Courtney, in my opinion, is one of those actors that they've tried to, be the next Russell Crowe in a sense, but it didn't work out so well for him. But I will say in this movie, he is probably at his best. I mean, between this and him as Captain Boomerang in Suicide Squad, I think he's allowed to actually shine. And both directors, Christopher McQuarrie and David Ayer, actually, I would say they get the best out of him. Unfortunately, is other films and other directors that don't really get the best out of him, and why he, his career in Hollywood, kind of fizzle out to a degree. But he's very good in this movie. He's also menacing. There's one particular scene that I'll mention with him where him and his goon, they go to see the girl Sandy, who was involved with the whole trying to set up Jack Reacher, and everything. And the way he, oh, hey, you're Sandy, right? And the way he kind of, he's like a wolf in sheep clothing. So he gets close to her before him and his goon end up killing her and everything. It's just the way he kind of lowers her guard, and he's very charming and this, that, and the next thing you know, bam, she's dead type of thing. And like I say, he's very intense, like I say, in the moment, especially like I say that fight scene with him and Tom Cruise towards the end. I think is a very good fight scene, and like I say, he holds his own in that moment, of course, too, or whatever. So, I mean, I've talked about, quite a bit of things regarding the movie. I do want to kind of continue on talking about the fights and everything, because one particular scene that stands out is that bar fight scene. And it's really not a bar fight because they're actually outside the bar, because going back to the character of Sandy, where Jack, he's sitting there, he's in this bar and everything, and this girl walks over, she introduces herself as Sandy, and she asks him his name. And the whole kind of the running thing about Jack Reacher, which is a thing from the books and everything, and also it continues in the TV series also, but in the movies, he uses Yankee second baseman as his alias. Like it's like he just has all the Yankees second baseman, from all time pretty much memorized, and on a whim he will always pull out one of their names as an alias. And in this case, he uses the name Jimmy Reese. And that kind of freaks her out because you can tell like she's under the impression like, no, that's not the name that I was told that you are. Because she even says like, well, you don't look like a Jimmy. And he's like, well, what do I look like? But he keeps looking around because he's figuring like, yeah, if she's over here, something's not right. And we find out something is not right because, this goon squad, they come over and basically they kind of get in a back and forth with Jack, and they end up going outside. And because it's basically going to beat the shit out of Jack. And I always like the line that he tells the main dude, Jeb, before they start fighting. He's like, and remember, you wanted this. And Jeb kind of looks at him kind of confused, but he kind of gives this smile. But it's like, yeah, you getting into something that you're not fully prepared for. And I mean, Jack ends up beating up all the guys pretty much. Because he even tells them straight up, it's like, before we get started, he's like, he's going to take out the leader, and then you're going to have two of them that's going to try to fight. And then two of them always going to, somebody was going to take off and run. And that's literally exactly what happens. Because it's like, he's done this plenty of times. So he knows the drill, and he knows how it is going to play out. And it's like, they didn't think, oh, he just talking, just trying to get out of this. But then until they actually get in it and getting their behind whooped, and Jack has a thing where he fights dirty because he likes to kick people in the damn balls, and everything. So I enjoy that fight scene. It's not a long fight scene, but it's one to kind of show one, Tom Cruise, he still got it. I was saying, even though he's 50, and 50's not old, but at that point in time, you thinking, oh, okay, Tom Cruise is getting to 50. Yeah, he gonna start slowing down somewhere. And it's like, yeah, Tom Cruise ain't slowing down. He's like freaking Leonardo DiCaprio in The Wolf of Wall Street. Like, I'm not leaving. I'm not slowing down, basically. Like, I'm gonna do bigger and better things and crazier things to try to pretty much kill myself and have this, daredevil approach to filmmaking, basically. But like I say, it's a dope fight scene. Another scene that I will point out is the car chase scene where Jack pretty much is getting framed for after they kill Sandy. They basically set it up as if he killed Sandy and everything. So you get Emerson, played by David, and he, him and the rest of the cops, they end up chasing Jack because Jack is driving Jeb's car. And Jeb is actually dead too. We find out that they killed him to basically shut him up, and everything. And one of the things that I really enjoy about this car chase scene, for one, I love car chase scenes anyway in movies. I actually did an episode long time ago on the podcast talking about my top 10 favorite car chase scenes. But when you're watching the scene, what I really enjoyed about this scene is that it felt like a throwback to old school car chases because there's no music playing over any of this. There's only the engines and sounds, on the streets and everything of the cars. That's what you get. You get the sound of the cars. And I always feel like when a movie has a car chasing, and if you're driving it out, the engines and the sounds, cars and everything like that, to have like some music playing over it, I feel like that waters down what a good car chase scene is. I mean, everyone enjoys things differently, I know that, but for me personally, car chase scenes like this is what I get a kick out of. And like I said, I was thoroughly surprised. And it's like, I remember the first time watching this movie that when I realized, like, wait a minute, there's no music playing in this at all. And we just getting the sounds of the car and all that type of stuff. And it's dope, and everything. And the way Christopher McQuarrie, the way him and his team, the way they film it, because they have the, they have the rigs that's on the car. So you know that, okay, Tom Cruise is driving the car. Jack Courtney is driving his car. David is driving his car. And so you get this, even though there are a few moments. One in particular, I think Tom kind of screwed up, and they kind of left it in the movie because it adds a little bit to it, where he kind of crashes the car a little bit, but he he kind of, he kind of lets you know, like, okay, well, the car does have a lot of damage to it, so it's like, yeah, it would make sense for that to happen. But I always assumed that he wasn't supposed to do that, but they just left it in the movie anyway. And plus, the streets is wet too, so this car is sliding all over the place, and he literally destroys this car. And it's a beautiful car too. And it's like, oh, it's like, why are you destroying this freaking car? But it's a great car chase scene. It is one of my favorites in recent history or whatever. And then too, also the final shootout at this kind of quarry. Interesting enough, that's where they are. The director's last name is McQuarrie, and they're at a quarry at the end of the movie. And you even get Robert Duvall in on action because he's out there, shooting some shots and plugging some people, and everything, which is kind of insane because he was already in his late 70s at the time that this movie came out. And like I say, he was still, like, I still got some too now. I can still do some of this. And everything. And like I say, the fact that this movie is pre John Wick, but it's post Heat and post Born Identity, but you can kind of tell there's elements, at least of Heat, Born Identity, and even a little bit of what we would know of John Wick, especially the first movie that would come along two years after this. I just like I say, the precision skills sets that they do in this movie. And like when Jack goes and he actually meets Robert Duvall character of Cash, who owns the gun range where James Barr would go and practice his shooting, and come to find out that Jai Courtney's character was actually manipulating him from behind, all alone type of thing. But I enjoy that scene too when he's doing the target practice and him, because he introduces himself to Cash as a Yankee second baseman. I think he even used Jimmy Reese with him also, and everything. And he even kind of alludes like, yeah, he knew his name and not Jimmy Reese, because he's like, all right, now come on now, play ball, type of thing. Because the first shot that he takes is a bad shot, and Cash kind of looked at him like, huh? Like, what the hell was that? Type of thing. But then he get himself together and he actually shoots the same exact shots that James Barr did. And that's how they get the whole conversation going. And the fact that Cash even comes along, to help him towards the end, because he even says, like, I don't even know if I should even be here, but this seems like it's for a good cause, so I'm doing this anyway, even though I know I shouldn't, or whatever. But I know I talked a little bit about Christopher McQuarrie towards the beginning, but I would say if you've never seen The Way of the Gun, you should definitely watch that movie, and then watch Jack Reacher, and just watch how the gunplay and the style is in both of these movies, and how much, I want to say, like 70s film fuse that both of these movies are. The Way of the Gun clearly could be like a Western, if it was set like in cowboy era time or whatever. It clearly could be, especially with the fact that the two main characters in that movie are named Parker and Longbow, which are Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid's real names, and everything. But let's say, watching how Ryan Phillippe and Benicio del Toro, how they move and how they are very tactical in that movie. And then, like I say, watching how Jack Reacher is in this movie as far as the precision, the way and skill that he uses. And everybody, like, for the most part, even Jack Courtney's character, like, very methodical, is very tight. And it's just, McQuarrie has a very good style. And always, like I say, even though it's not so much a knock that he kind of became Tom Cruise's director, but at the same time, it would have been cool, like, just to think about the other films that he probably could have directed, and with his style of filmmaking, like, he can really do some great stuff. I mean, granted, he's done great stuff with the Mission Impossible movies, but on his own, I think he could even do a lot more. I feel like, because I do feel like he is a good director, and everything. And how interesting enough that when you watch Jack Reacher, you can kind of tell that McQuarrie and Tom Cruise, I feel like, take some of what they did here and bring it to the Mission Impossible franchise. I mean, if you look at Rogue Nation, Fallout, and even Dead Reckoning and Final Reckoning, if you look at those movies, you can actually see like the influence that Jack Reacher, the movie, has on the later half of the Mission Impossible series and everything. So let's see here. So even though Jack Reacher as a movie was not like a huge blockbuster hit, I mean, it did okay at the movie theater, and everything. But it did garner, I want to say, like a loyal cult following, like after it was released, and people like after it came out of the movie theater, and then once it got its DVD release and everything like that, and I think people started to gravitate to it because I want to say that it got played on like TNT and stuff like way before The Accountant came along. I do believe that Jack Reacher was a movie that did get played on TNT quite often. I could be wrong on that, but I do believe it did, and everything. So, through that, I think that's how he kind of developed a cult following. Plus, too, the fact that Christopher McQuarrie became, the Mission Impossible director. I'm pretty sure people based off of that went back and say, oh, well, let me check out Way of the Gun. Oh, let me check out Jack Reacher, type of thing. Because of that, I believe that is the reason why we did get a sequel to Jack Reacher Never Go Back, which is not as it is not as good as the first one. And I feel like because of the fact Christopher McQuarrie is not a part of it, I think that's why it doesn't have the same energy or vibe and everything. And I was kind of wondering why he didn't come back and direct this sequel and everything. But I mean, Tom came back as Jack Reacher, and like I said, it's a decent movie. But when you watch it after watching the first movie, granted, you do not have to watch because it's not a sequel like that. Even though it's a sequel because the main character is in the movie, but it's not a. You can watch both movies without having to watch the other, if that makes sense, and everything. And then of course, like I said, you got the TV series on Amazon and everything. Alan Richardson, he does a great job playing Jack Reacher. I like the supporting cast that he has, especially his team that came along in season 2. I thought he did an excellent job. Season 3, I actually still need to finish. I started it, but I haven't finished it. I've kind of been very bad with TV series here lately, where I've been starting them and not really finishing them, and then kind of slowly go back and finish them and everything like that. But I did see season 1 and season 2 all the way through of Reacher, at least. And like I said, it's a great show. And if you haven't checked it out, I do highly recommend it, and everything. And like I say, Alan Richardson's version of Jack Reacher is not exactly what Tom Cruise did, but you can see the similarities as far as the tone of what the character is and everything. So that's pretty much kind of it. I've kind of talked a lot about the movie without really going through really talking about it, and that's only because I want people to actually watch the movie, and everything. So I would say definitely check this movie out. I feel like it is a very good movie. I feel like it's one of Tom Cruise's better action films. I would put it probably in that second, third tier of his filmography, and everything. And that's not a slight or anything towards the movie. It's just that as of right now, Tom Cruise has only been in 46 movies, and he has different phases of his career. He has kind of his teen era, teen heartthrob type era. Then, the later 80s and early 90s where he's doing more drama thriller type stuff. And then he kind of, moves into, his Oscar bait films are there also. And then he kind of full-fledges himself, I want to say from Jack Reacher on. Yeah, he kind of goes all in into the whole action star vibe. Granted, he does a few other movies that are kind of outside of the action genre around this time. He does American Made, and he also does, unfortunately, that Mummy movie and everything. But so he does get outside of that a little bit, but for the most part, he goes full on action star Tom Cruise. And I feel like from 2012 on to now, that's where he's pretty much, made his name in that lane. And I don't knock him for that. I really don't. I mean, he's good at it. Granted, it would be nice to see him kind of go back and do, hell, maybe even do another courtroom drama. He hasn't done that in a while. I mean, A Few Good Men, The Firm, Firm being one of my favorite movies of his, period. And it's actually one of my favorite movies of all time, actually. He does great, in that lane also. And then, of course, he does a few movies that's not really, I feel like, in his wheelhouse. But at the same time, Jack Reacher, I feel, is a dope movie. And is a movie that if you are a fan of Tom Cruise, or if you not really a fan, but you can tolerate his films, I do recommend, checking out Jack Reacher at least. So before we actually close this up, is Jack Reacher an underrated movie? I would say it's an underrated movie in the sense of it's not your typical Tom Cruise action film. And yeah, like I say, it's a movie, and it's dope and everything. And I enjoyed it. I thoroughly enjoyed watching it again for this episode, and everything. So I do have a few questions for you guys, the listeners. Of course, you can always comment your replies to me either on my personal page, The J Giles, or the Movie Talk page on Twitter, on Instagram, JMT Podcast, or you can email me at jmovietalk@gmail.com, and any replies that I get back, I definitely will read them on the episode, on the next episodes or whatever. So first question I have that I'm gonna ask you guys: did Tom Cruise pull off Jack Reacher for you? So how do you feel about him as Jack Reacher? Is he good? Is he bad? He suck? And everything like that. How do you feel? And everything. Second question: what's your favorite smart kind of slow burn action movie that kind of is similar to this, whatever? Do you have a movie that's like this that you thoroughly enjoy or whatever? And then the last question I will ask you guys is, should Cruise have did a third Reacher movie, or did the series do Jack Reacher better? Now I will answer this particular question. Now, should he have done a third Jack Reacher movie? I don't think so, unless Christopher McQuarrie came back and directed. But then at the same time, where exactly would a third Jack Reacher movie fit into what his later career becomes? So, I mean, I look at that as a factor also too. And then, like I say, I'm not going to say that the Amazon series is better, but it's different. And I feel like it's because of who is involved in both projects is why it's different. But I feel like both are great versions and representation of what the character of Jack Reacher is. So that's pretty much it for this episode. I want to thank you guys for listening. I want to thank you all for coming along on this year's May Action ride with me and everything. I'm looking forward to what I'll be doing in June. I'm still trying to figure out what exactly I'm going to do for the entire month, but I do have two movies I know for a fact that I will be discussing on the podcast. One is the baseball movie Bull Durham, starring Kevin Costner, Susan Sarandon, and Tim Robbins. And I will have a couple of guests on to talk about that movie. And the fact that June has a Friday the 13th, so I will be doing the 2009 remake of Friday the 13th, as I will be doing my real-time live watch like I have done with the entire franchise. So that is the next Friday the 13th that I'll be doing. Looking forward to that as well, because I do have some thoughts about that movie, and as I watch and talk about it, I will share those thoughts with you, the listeners, and everything like that. So again, thank you all for listening to this episode. That is the end of May Action Month, and I will catch you guys back in June, where it's gonna be a very good summer. So until next time, peace.